I'm Amanda Leitner, and welcome to Rochester Rising, where we amplify the stories of Rochester entrepreneurs. Welcome to episode 207 of the podcast today. So before launching into brand new recordings for 2021, I wanted to just take one more week to look back and listen in to some of the most popular and most downloaded podcasts on Rochester Rising in 2020. So today I wanted to share with you just little snippets from the 4 most popular podcasts that we aired over the last year. And these ended up being in very, very different industries, from biotech to entrepreneurial ecosystem building to a record store, and then finally a web-based financial planning business. So these are just a few moments of the conversations we had with these entrepreneurs last year. So I encourage you all to check out the full conversation that we had with each of these individuals, which will be linked in our show notes, to catch their full story. So although 2020 was very odd, very strange, and a very devastating year on many different levels, we were able to have some really great conversations, whether in person at the beginning of the year, social distanced at the end, or via Zoom in the middle, to really capture the story of innovation, entrepreneurship, and business development here in Rochester. So oddly, these top podcasts all came at the beginning of the year, in the first 3 months of 2020. They all either were recorded between really January and March, or aired within that time frame. So they were really done in person and really done prior to the start of the pandemic. So you won't really hear anything about COVID in these conversations because no one was really thinking about it at that time. And that, I think, really demonstrates how dramatic and drastic everyone's world has changed this year. And I'm sure things have changed for these businesses that you'll hear from today. So I really hope you enjoy these conversations. And again, you can check out the full podcast with each of these innovators through our show notes. So thanks so much for joining us today on Rochester Rising. A reminder that we are the storytelling arm of Collider, which is a Rochester-based nonprofit that supports early-stage entrepreneurs through events, education, space, and storytelling. You can find out more about Collider on our website at collider.mn. That's COLLIDER.mn. Our goal at Rochester Rising is to amplify stories of Rochester entrepreneurs through original, insightful, and in-depth content. We put out this weekly podcast that you've found in some manner. We air a new podcast every Wednesday, and it comes out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and really wherever you listen in to podcasts. We also air articles and videos weekly to talk about entrepreneurship and to tell the stories of entrepreneurs in our community. And you can find that content on our website at rochesterrising.org. So we encourage you to check it out to learn more about the entrepreneurial ecosystem and what's going on here in our community. So the first podcast that I want to share a little bit of today goes back to podcast episode 171 with Tim Nelson and ReGen Theranostics. And this podcast aired on April 15th, but we recorded it either in late February or early March. I can't quite remember at this point, but I do remember that it was the very last podcast that I recorded in person for several months. I think I basically went to ReGen to record this podcast with Dr. Nelson and then didn't come back to work at my desk in my office space for the next over 3 months. So I'll always remember it for that, but it was a really great conversation with Dr. Tim Nelson. So if you are not familiar with Dr. Nelson, he's a researcher and physician at Mayo Clinic, and he specializes in hypoplastic left heart syndrome, or HLHS. HLHS is a severe congenital disease where infants are born without the left side of their heart, and they require 3 open heart surgeries to survive. Dr. Nelson is also a founder at the Rochester-based biotech firm ReGen Theranostics, which manufactures induced pluripotent stem cells in a reproducible manner. ReGen was one of the first tenants in the Minnesota Biobusiness Center and now is located on 41st Street in Northwest Rochester. When we sat down and recorded this podcast, ReGen was in the final stages of preclinical testing, and they were hoping to offer the first clinical trial of bioengineered cardiac tissues in 2021. So enjoy the podcast today with Dr. Tim Nelson to learn more about ReGen, his biomedical research, and more about what that biotech startup is doing here in the community. So I'll leave you first with episode 171 with Dr. Tim Nelson and ReGen Theranostics. So we're in the lab/office space at ReGen Theranostics out on 41st Street. So I think before diving into what you do here, what kind of need or gap was there in the scientific biomedical community for a biotech like this?
Yeah, so at the biotech that we'll talk more about today really came out of a regenerative medicine, cell-based perspective. And early on, when Shinya Yamanaka won the Nobel Prize in 2012 for the bioengineered iPS cells, or induced pluripotent stem cells, with Ike as a faculty here at molecular medicine, we started working together almost immediately to reprogram cells, starting in animal models and then doing human patient cells. We started doing this technology as soon as it became publishable, as soon as I became aware of it. And with that gap, there became a full-time job of just making cells for researchers and for our lab and for other people. And it really inspired us to think we got to build some sort of a core service, if you will, that could be available on demand 7 days a week and scalable to support this cell-based engineering effort that was really at its infancy in 2012.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think having stable cell lines that what their origins are, it takes so much time and research.
Yeah,
I used to work in with osteoclasts, and you had to isolate them every time. You had to come in to the lab every other day, no matter what, holidays, weekends, whatever. Otherwise, they wouldn't differentiate, or they wouldn't get to the end point.
Sure.
They'd just be weird, kind of undifferentiated cells. So it's a huge need to have a reliable source of cells to further your research. So do you want to talk a little bit about more about what you do here at ReGen in terms of the products and services that you offer?
So when we started in 2000 early on, I guess we started the company in about 2010. The Nobel Prize was awarded in 2012. So in that early time period, in 2010 when we started, it was really figuring out how to make the induced pluripotent stem cells reproducible. Everybody was trying it. Everybody had some success. You could get it to happen once in a while, but it was very chaotic. So what we did is we committed to a team that wasn't postdocs or students that weren't going to get a career out of figuring this out, but really a core group of us that were committed to the quality control, as you mentioned, with cells. And so we really committed ourselves just to the quality control of iPS reprogramming. And we had some amazing people working with us from the very beginning that really helped us figure this out. And then incrementally, step by step, we've scaled it to having arguably one of the largest experiences in the country, if not the world, in producing induced pluripotent stem cells from our patients at Mayo Clinic. We've now done over 800 patients that we've reprogrammed into induced pluripotent stem cells for ourselves and for other groups. And it's a dedicated professional activity that's 7 days a week. In a farming community like ours, it's more like having the pigs and cattle on the farm rather than the soybeans. It's a daily commitment.
Right. And I think we're definitely a community, focused on medicine too. And I think a lot of people have ideas around medicine, around biotech. So can you talk a little bit about how does a concept like this go from idea to going through all the processes, clinical trials, whatnot, to get to where you are now?
Yeah, so to extend the bioengineered iPS cells, I guess our commitment was quality was going to be the key thing for clinical trials in the future. We didn't really have a true clean vision of how bioengineered cells would be used at that early stage in 2010, but we knew the quality had to be impeccable. And so that was what we've really committed ourselves to, the reproducibility of it, the cost effectiveness of it, and the highest quality. And so that was really 8 years of really dedicated effort of just getting quality control perfected. And we now are quite confident that we would be surprised if there was a patient we could not reprogram into induced pluripotent cells and have cells that we could then differentiate into what we care about is the cardiomyocyte. So we've gotten confident with the reproducibility of it, and that doesn't happen in a 6-month cycle. That doesn't happen even in a couple of years. That was really a firm, long commitment that we had to make. Now, in the evolution of that, we now are at the point where we have had our pre-IND meeting with the FDA about 8-9 months ago at this point, where we talked through them with a plan of launching the first clinical trial using bioengineered cardiac tissue for congenital heart disease. And the FDA was very constructive, very helpful, and now we are in the final stages of our preclinical testing with the processes that are getting locked down as we speak. And we hope in 2021 that we will be in a position to offer the first clinical trial of bioengineered cardiac tissue in a clinical trial. And that seemed like a pretty crazy idea in 2010. And to think that we've done that in 10 years is really a testament of many things. The ecosystem of Mayo Clinic and Rochester has been a major part of that success story. But on the other hand, it's really not a success. It's really just a stepping stone. We really have so much more work to do that just getting to this point where we can see the clinical trial has been a major effort. But going past that clinical trial and really getting this to a product development is a whole nother skill set and a whole nother team, and it just continues to snowball and grow with expertise as you go through every step of the process.
Yeah, so lots of growing, room to grow. So next, I want to jump back to episode 166 to share a little bit of that conversation with you. This podcast aired on March 4th, and we got to chat with David Ollila about 100K Ideas, which is based in Flint, Michigan. So this was one of my most memorable and fun podcasts that I have done with David. It was a really wonderful conversation. Unfortunately, I cut most of that out from what I included today, but I encourage you to check back in with podcast episode 166. We talked a lot about being outdoors and how kind of that resilience and being uncomfortable relates to entrepreneurship. But for the purposes of this conversation today, I did not include that part. But it was so fun to get to meet David and really understand how he has built entrepreneurial communities in Michigan and how that can apply to Rochester. So a little bit about David Ollila and why he was here in the community. He is an entrepreneurial ecosystem builder currently based in Flint, Michigan. And he was in town at the end of February because he was the keynote speaker for the Ready annual meeting and luncheon. And again, it's one of those things when you're looking back, you know, like we had this large meeting with all these great people in the community and something that really didn't happen past February and that I miss very, very much happening in the community. So this is also for me a very memorable podcast and a very memorable discussion because it was one of those last fabrics of normalcy that we had in 2020. So a little bit more about David. He's always been an innovator, and he began creating solutions to problems at the age of 7, and he currently holds 16 different patents. He spent his career in both Marquette and Flint, Michigan, bolstering the local innovation community and understanding how to cultivate ideas from within a community. Outputs of these initiatives have included Invent and NMU, 100K Ideas, and renovation of the Ferris wheel building in Flint, Michigan into an innovation center. So in my conversation with David, we really had a wonderful conversation about the differences between innovation and entrepreneurship, how you find the most personal growth when you're uncomfortable, and how to drive inclusion in your innovation ecosystem. So enjoy this little bit of the conversation with David Ollila. And again, I encourage you to check back in with episode 166 for the full conversation I had with him, and I will have links to that in our show notes. Yeah, so started or were involved in a lot of important ventures in Flint, including SkyPoint Ventures, Ferris Wheel, and 100K Ideas. So what need did each of these play to fill gaps you saw in Flint, and what kind of makes up a healthy entrepreneurial ecosystem?
Great. So you need density, you need diversity, and you need that full spectrum. So you do need efforts looking at those big opportunities, and that's important. And so from the SkyPoint Ventures perspective, my title there is I'm the president and the chief innovation officer. And essentially I'm managing a portfolio of investment companies that have some very big opportunities, but they also take an incredible amount of resources, an incredible amount of risk, and quite a bit of runway to be able to make those things happen. That's important, but it's the second and third tier entrepreneurial activities that I believe are the most important. So the Ferris wheel is very much like sitting in Collider here. Mm-hmm. It is a co-working space. It's a little bit bigger. It's the 7 stories, 40,000 square feet. But there's about, in Flint, there's 87% occupancy of that co-working space, which is actually pretty significant. There's about 60 companies operating in there. Some of them are startups and some of them are 50 years old, and some of them come from surrounding community to bring those opportunities into Flint. So the Ferris Wheel Innovation Center has essentially created kind of the culture, or what I call the new town square, and it pulls people in and gets them excited about what's happening. And that's kind of that mid-tier that you build out. And then 100K, and I'd be lying if I didn't say this was the most exciting part of what I'm doing, because it's really my model of, again, how do you relieve the innovator of the entrepreneurial burden? And as I mentioned, in Marquette, Michigan, at Invent at NMU, you have one new idea coming in the door every 3 days. In Flint, Michigan, a town of about 100,000 people, it's up to 3 ideas a day. And on a good week, we might have 5 to 10 ideas that come through the door from the absolute unusual suspects. I think our youngest client is 13 years old and our oldest client is 94 years old. And it's everything in between. That starts to build the energy and this concept that there's opportunities for everyone to figure out how to get into the world of entrepreneurship in a somewhat supported way. And the combination of kind of those 3 things are attracting new capital to the community. And so an angel group has been formed, and we're on the radar of the Michigan Venture Capital Association. And it's also, I think, one of the things that Flint has done that's very, very interesting from a state perspective is there's a lot of silos. I'm sure you have silos here in Minnesota, and especially in Michigan. So, when people think of Michigan, they think of Detroit.
Yep.
But Detroit has its own culture and its own mass. Mm-hmm. And then you have Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids survived the downturn of the automobile industry because of its density and diversification in its economic development. It wasn't just automobiles. It was furniture, automobiles, manufacturing, and medical. And so Grand Rapids is a really interesting community to take a look at, and how you can insulate yourself from up and downs of the economy. But you also have Lansing, and you have Kalamazoo, and then you have all of the stuff happening on the northern part of the state, and then you have the UP. So one of the things I think we've been able to do that's I'm very proud of is Flint has now become a aggregator of the smartest, brightest, or the people with the most energy willing to be and work in uncomfortable situations. And I really think that we're pulling people together. And that's a role that I didn't necessarily see happening. But it's also symbolic of the fact that states like Michigan, states like Minnesota have diversified economies. Doesn't mean that you have to separate your communities.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I was actually reading a great story on Flint entrepreneurs yesterday. I think I was about 3 years old at this point in Inc. You probably read it. But yeah, it was just the breadth of like the different types of entrepreneurs. There was some lady, I can't remember what the name of the business was, but it was like gourmet potatoes, baked potatoes.
Yeah.
And like Spuds, yeah. Mm-hmm. I was thinking Spudsy, but that's on a TV show. Uh-huh. But just like an idea that was a need that filled something that previously used to have been there and kind of take it to the next level. And there is an entrepreneur clothing, good boy clothing.
Oakland. And he's in our space and doing a fantastic job.
Yeah, so just, these people filling a need, pursuing some passions, and, making their lives and the lives of people around them better. So
and willing to do all of the work that's necessary.
Yep. And I think that's a gap in our community here that we need to fill is we do better working with people when they're past that idea stage, but that idea stage is what fuels the pipeline. So, we have 1 million cups, but you're beyond idea stage usually at that point. Mm-hmm. So, what can we do in this community that fills that need where we have, 2 people a day walking in the door to talk about their idea and where do they land? So I think that's something we need to address in the near future to help with the pipeline and help with diversification of our economy to, like you were saying, help insulate it from, and Rochester was largely insulated from, the 2012 recession, but I think we can do better, for our entrepreneurs and our, community.
The great thing about concentrating on ideas is the barrier is very, very low. And so, yes, you're going to look at a lot of really bad ideas, but my whole life has been built on a lot of really bad ideas and a few good ones. And an interesting statistic that I like to share. So at 100K ideas, the average person who comes in is holding their idea for up to 5 years before they're willing to share it. And as an entrepreneur myself and as someone who's been practicing it almost my whole life, I didn't realize how important courage was within this process. It was, I'm completely obtuse to the fact that it would take courage to start something. It's just in my nature. And so what happens is these folks are holding their ideas like it's a lottery ticket. Mm-hmm. I've got an idea. I've heard about this pet rock, this one idea that's made all sorts of money. And so instead of scratching off the lottery ticket, what people do is they hold on to it. So they keep going to the job that they don't love, and they keep going through the life that they don't love or that doesn't challenge them or doesn't give them the kind of passion that's necessary to really create change for themselves and those around them. If I scratch off those numbers, I'm going to know that this idea is not worth pursuing, and then I will not be able to dream about becoming a multimillionaire and living on an island somewhere. So it's actually very detrimental to the community to have people holding on to ideas. So Rochester has a little over 100,000 people within the population. I know without any doubt that every single person is walking around with an idea, and over 60% of them are afraid to share it because that idea might not get them this grandiose vision of what an entrepreneur is. And so they're actually more willing to hold on to the dream than to activate the dream. The process has to be that the very moment you have an idea is when you start pursuing that idea, and you stop pursuing it as soon as you realize it doesn't have the value that's necessary to create an ongoing entrepreneurial endeavor. And you know what happens? 25% of the people that come in and realize that their lottery ticket should have been scratched off 5 years ago, they come back in with a new idea, then they come in with another idea, and that's how you activate the base density of innovation and turn it into entrepreneurial economic development.
Yeah. So now I want to jump back just a few podcasts to episode 163 with Vy Thorng and Hidden World Vinyl Records, and this aired in February, on February 12th, 2020. This was another great conversation that I got to have with a local business owner in the community. At that point, Hidden World Vinyl Records had just opened a few months prior. It had its grand opening around December 13th. In 2019. So I got to talk to Vy right at the very beginning of his journey with Hidden World Vinyl Records. If you are not aware of what this business is or haven't checked it out yet, I encourage you to do so. It's an independent record store that's located here in Rochester on 2nd Avenue Northwest. And we really talked a lot about Vy's journey, the many things he explored throughout his career, throughout his life, really starting from being a cake decorator in Minneapolis, and really his passion for music and how he's finding his space and creating his own path here in the music community in Rochester. So this was another wonderful conversation, pre-pandemic, that we got to have, learning more about Hidden World Vinyl Records, which again, at this point when we were talking with Vy, had just recently opened in the community. So check out or listen in to this little bit of the conversation I had with Vy, and again, encourage you to check out the full conversation in episode 163, which is linked in the show notes. So you have your record store now. So what's your history with music? Why is that a passion of yours?
Well, my father was a musician. He was the only one in our family that's a musician. Everybody else are karaoke singers, and they're terrible. They do it every weekend, you know. And but my father was an actual musician. He played a lot of instruments, and he had a touring band. It was like a bunch of hippies who played like ethnic instruments.
Okay.
And he was the Cambodian man who did the singing and the drumming and stuff like that, but he was the band leader, and they toured around Kansas City, Chicago, Omaha.
Nice.
You know, places like they went as far down as Florida and as east as Boston.
Okay.
And then, and he was also a community leader and stuff like that. But his musicianship, when I was growing up, was just like a weird thing that he did. You know, it was cool, but again, it's not that cool when you're in the hood. You like rap, you like metal, you like punk.
And
you know,
Dad's playing hippie music.
Playing hippie music, you know, you're like, eh. But then, like, as I got a little bit, you know, older into music, and I wanted to expand more music, I found out that his stuff was actually really cool, and I found his tapes, you know, and I was really, really into music. I went to shows voraciously, like a lot. I went to every show I can go to that's free or cheap, or $5, or in a basement, or in an attic. I didn't care, you know. And I listened to music really loud. I have really low hearing in this side.
Just
you know, I was always so excited to see like a random show. I like surprises. For some reason, that's for me like surprises in music, like, the arc of a song.
Okay.
Those things always work for me, no matter what. It doesn't end. It doesn't stop, and I look for that in everything. And just even the recent show I had at my shop we were at, I didn't know what the band was. I didn't care. You know? He's like, check out my YouTube videos. Like, nope.
Just come in.
I don't want to. I don't know you. You sound great. Somebody said you were great. Come on in. And he was great. And that's kind of that's how I got into music, was always that curiosity. It was always curiosity. It was never anything else. I didn't want to be a musician because I'm terrible at, playing music. I've tried so many times. I've been in bands, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't get the thing right. I can't dance. I can't dance and I can't sing. And so what do? You just enjoy it.
It's good to know your skills.
Yeah, it's just good to know your skills. Keep with the cake decorating, man. Listen to records.
But you kind of fueled that passion and funneled that love for music with your record store. So what kind of sparked you to say, this is what I need to do. I'm going to open a brick and mortar record store here in Rochester.
Oh my God. Yeah. So I have some friends here that have been around for a while doing the record store stuff. And I've met everyone who does records in town. I've gone to all the shows and everything like that. And I have a handful of my own stuff. Even though I moved around a dozen times, I always had a crate of my favorites, and I miss them dearly. Yeah. They're gone now, but I miss them dearly. And so what I did was I ended up helping my friend out at the Castle, at the record shop there. I worked there once a week on Thursdays, so I got the whole place to myself. I just played whatever I wanted. It was super fun, and we had great records there. And I never thought of opening a record shop. I never want to be a shopkeeper. I don't want to be an entrepreneur. I don't want to be a businessman. I have no idea what any of this stuff means. I was telling you, I was like,
yeah.
And then I had this space open up, and I was thinking, what if we did something different from the Castle, but similar, where we can piggyback off each other? Because it's a small community. We're friends. I'm not competition with anyone in town. We have different stuff.
Yeah.
Completely
very
different
much
stuff.
So, yeah.
And I'm working even harder to be more different, not to be in competition, just because we want variety in this town. So what happened was, when I built this thing, I didn't have that many records. I started off with 1,000, just junk, just to fill in the spaces. I knew I'd get them somewhere, because the records live in the world. You don't just buy them. You don't go somewhere and just buy them. Here you go, I got a bunch of records. You have to go and find them. They're in somebody's house. They're in somebody's collection. Somebody's dying, and they're going to have to put something somewhere. They're at the library. They're at thrift stores. They're online,
Yeah.
They're in other cities. They're in other states, So I knew that was going to be the hard part, but I didn't know how hard it was going to be. So what I did was I just started building building. So I started in August. I started leasing the place in August. So just built and I had all these things in mind and no template. I knew what a record store looked like. I've been to 1,000 of them. They're all lovely, you know, but I wanted something for myself, something simpler, something kind of like newer, and also a little bit more flexible and lean. Very lean, because, you know, like the budget's really small. All the furniture, all the stuff I got in there, all like, it came to like maybe under $500. You know, and the wood, I did it all myself over the weekends, and I didn't have any help because I didn't want any help. I didn't know what anybody would do. They can paint the wall, you know, but as far as thinking things up, you know, like building all the things, I didn't know. I wouldn't know. So people would just stand there and look at me like, I don't know what to do. Like, go paint a wall, you know, or mop or whatever. And so that's kind of how that went. And then I didn't have, like I said, I didn't have the inventory until one day I've been looking for inventory guys in town. I knew a couple of them, and they're very, very, what's the word? Record people are very fickle.
Okay.
Or not fickle. What's the word? When they keep things very close.
Oh, yeah, protective, I guess.
Protective.
Yeah.
I'm protective.
I could see how that would be if there's only so many, like, and it's just so hard to get them in the first place.
They are very hard to get them, and there's so many, and you can't really always pick and choose with your if it's a monetary thing. You know, if you have only so much, like say if you have $1,000, you can probably only get about 200 records.
Really?
Yeah, unless you want crappy ones, you can get a million of them. But why own a record store with crappy records?
Well, you got to sell them.
You got to sell them, yeah. You know, and so like to get the good stuff, you have to find the right people who already have collections. So it was a matter of piecing together collections. And one day, you know, I was like talking to Cassandra, my neighbor. She has the art shop, and she was ready to open. And I'm like, I got these. I just got them. They're okay. You know, they're not good. They're just placeholders right now for what my thing's going to look like. And she's like, I believe in you, man. And I was like, I don't know what that means. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it. So a couple days later, you know, Halloween, I was at a party out in the woods or some sea cap. And I meet this young guy, and he's like, I was like, hey, I got a record shop. You know anybody that's got records? He's like, I got records. I'm like, how do you have records? You're 27 years old. And then I was drunk. We were having fun, you know, and then I didn't really believe him.
Right. I probably wouldn't either.
I didn't believe him. I was like, show up the next day. He shows up the next day with the first few crates, and they were phenomenal.
Oh, wow.
And we had a record shop.
Nice.
Yeah. And he's been buying from me ever since.
Random encounter.
It was super random, and he's been buying from me ever since, and he's lovely, and he's very smart. He's very good at what he does. He's singular in thought.
See, I would not believe that someone that I met in the woods
I know, right?
would be like for real.
I didn't either. He didn't look like the fitting type. He didn't match the description of like the record guy.
A record person.
You know, but then when he came in, he was like, look at these, man. I was like, that's amazing. The first few hundred he brought were incredible, and then we've been bringing thousands ever since.
So, you know, when people are coming into the store, what kind of experience do you want them to have there? And I see you're doing a whole bunch of events too. So you're doing, like you said, when you had a band come in, and are you doing like an R&B or hip hop?
Yeah, we're gonna
night
do it. Like we had a show last week. It was like I let Team Martyrsville, this kid that he's not a kid. Sorry, he's 27 years old. This gentleman come in. He met me. When we first started opening the shop, I asked him to come in and look at the Cassandra's place to see if he wanted to rent it. You know, it didn't work out. Never saw him again, and he came back a few weeks later, or you know, a month later, and said, "Hey, can I do a thing?" I was like, "Of course you can. Why not? Do what you want to do." And he said, "Open mic." I was like, open mic's pretty common. You know, let's do it differently. We'll call it an open mic, but let's do it a certain way where we have more of these rappers in town show up and do their thing, because I want to hear that. You know, I've seen the guy with the guitar. I've seen the, you know, whatever. I don't have any problems with that. You know, neo covers are fantastic, but I want to see somebody, you know, like do something for themselves and from a different demographic. You know, like I'm used to. I've been all over town. I haven't seen one single rap show that I liked.
I have.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I haven't been invited because I'm not in. Again, I'm not in. So I'm looking for actually not just diversity. I'm looking for just choices.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm looking for
Something
choices. So to go back to what you were saying, and when people come in for the experience, I want them to make their own experience. Okay. It's literally just 4 walls with a bunch of stuff on the walls. I want to keep it a vinyl shop for a reason, because like with the vinyl shop, you can't go anywhere else. You can't look at anything else. It's literally everywhere you look. Like the other day when I was there, it's like I literally jam-packed this thing with all just vinyl. The seat next to me had them,
Yeah.
The thing I had them, because that's where I can only put them. The back is full, and it will remain full, and because we're going to get more, and they have to go somewhere, and they can't be outside, they can't be in storage in another place, because what's the point of having a place when you don't have it there?
Right.
So whenever customers come in, they see the choices, it can be overwhelming, but if you spend a little time and dig, that is an activity. That's a real activity.
Yeah, I think I spent it was pretty close to an hour that opening night just looking through everything. And then I was like, there's dust everywhere.
Yeah.
But it was awesome.
I tend to leave people alone, because when you're left alone, you're kind of like on your own to make your own decisions about what you want to do.
And you want to look at everything.
You don't need to be pointing in a direction. You know what records are.
Right.
You know what they sound like. You know what those bands are. And if you're unfamiliar with a band, you look at your phone.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't need that jerk behind the counter anymore to tell you what's cool and what's not. You can make up your own mind. You can get anything you want. So the choices are all there. So you make up your own adventure about what you want to do, what this space is for. It's not innovative. It's literally just a shop. There's no innovation going on. I think my only innovation is I step back. You know what I mean? No, I didn't like a hands-off way. I'm willing to help in any way, or have some sort of conversation about anything. Very approachable, but stepping back meaning we're taking that kind of vibe off of that snotty bullshit that was going on when I was a kid. I hated those guys. I didn't like any of them. I like their music. I like their stuff. I couldn't stand that attitude.
So you just come in and be, basically.
Yeah. I didn't like that. I never want to be part of that stuff. When I was working in the castle, I was by myself, so it was great. Got to just be, and just talk to people from all over, and it was really fun, and this place is beautiful. Kind of want to bring that in there, too. Same thing,
Mm-hmm. And for the final favorite podcast or top podcast of 2020 that I want to share with you today, I'm going to hop back to episode 159, which aired on January 15th, 2020. This was actually our first new podcast of 2020, where I got to sit down and chat with Dan and Natalie Slagle, who are co-founders of Fyooz Financial Planning. So Dan and Natalie are members of Collider Co-working, so I had met them in the space here. And I think we actually recorded this podcast in 2019 before the holidays or during the holiday time. But anyway, it was the first brand new podcast of 2020. So if you have not heard of Fyooz Financial Planning or met Dan and Natalie yet, they are a married couple, and they launched Fyooz Financial Planning in October 2019. It is a fee-only financial planning business specifically for couples between their late 20s through their early 40s, where Dan and Natalie really saw a gap in the current financial planning landscape. So when I sat down and talked with Dan and Natalie, we talked about how the couple grew up around Rochester or between Rochester and St. Paul, which again, I kind of cut that part of the conversation from what you're hearing today, but I think you'll hear some snippets of it and what they're talking about. But they grew up here in the community, at least between Rochester and Minneapolis, St. Paul. They moved out to Portland, Oregon for a few years, working in the financial planning industry, but in different firms, but then really saw this gap, especially to serve young couples who are trying to merge their finances together. And that really launched their decision to start their business here in Rochester. So I will leave you with the final top podcast of 2020 with Dan and Natalie of Fyooz Financial Planning. So I think to start talking about what you have developed and are launching here in the community with Fyooz Financial, that's how you pronounce it, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What need did you see with people your age for something like this?
Yeah, so as you said, we own Fyooz Financial Planning, which is a fee-only financial planning firm. We both had worked at larger institutions, larger financial advising firms. But we noticed something was missing, and that's really providing advice to people our age in our demographic. So we focus specifically with working with couples in their late 20s to early 40s. Really, there was no way for those people to get involved with traditional financial advising firms because the way it works is you need to have a large nest egg saved to work or get access to financial help. So what we noticed was no one is helping this market, and this is a time when people need it most. When people are graduating with thousands of dollars of student debt, people are getting married, buying houses, having children.
Maybe starting a business
together. And all of these life events have financial implications, both now and in the future. So that's really what sparked our idea of starting this business.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing. And even, in the very early stages of your marriage relationship with, your partner, a lot of the times people just aren't having those conversations up front.
Right.
And I remember the closest my husband and I came to having that conversation is we had to sit down and do there's a specific name for it, but I can't remember. We got married in the Catholic Church, and you have to talk with, you have to go through a series of classes and talk with a couple.
Yeah.
So they were they told us, the only financial advice we got is, you need to consolidate your bank accounts as soon as possible, which we did not do because we thought that was too complicated for all of that.
It is a hard
the debt and the
process.
payments and
Absolutely.
stuff. And we were both... depends on, everything's relative, but older, in our early 30s when we got married. So we were like, we're not doing this, and really haven't gone back to address any of that since then. So it's a very difficult conversation, basically, is what I was trying to get at with anybody, no matter how close you are.
It really is. And, Dan and I were both so fortunate to be in the industry that we're in. Getting that expertise and that knowledge in the beginning and being able to utilize it in our personal lives. But even for us, what we noticed is that we're both so, we've got the technical skills in this industry, but how do you apply it to your personal life? I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of, I don't have time to combine my accounts, and I don't know how to have that conversation with my partner. And that was the value that we were like, this is something that we could provide because we've struggled with it as a married couple. And even though we have the expertise, it's so much more than that. And that's really the value that a lot of our friends and family saw in us, and they kind of helped encourage, hey, you guys got something unique here. And so that's what really kind of propelled the decision to create this offering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in our past experiences working with an older clientele, what we really notice is there's usually one financial spouse and then there's a non-financial spouse. So someone who doesn't really understand the whole picture on what's going on. So for us, yes, we live in a society where money's taboo, but it's even taboo somewhat in a relationship where you have one person who knows the ins and outs of what's going on, but the other spouse really doesn't have a clear understanding. And we've seen the end result to that as well.
Mm-hmm. Of just people not being, maybe their partner is away for a long time, or something even serious happens and they have to take control. The non-financial spouse, that's a huge undertaking when the last thing you want to deal with is something stressful like that. And so we think it's extremely important to get both parties involved, and the earlier the better, which is why we're going after the demographic we are.
But yeah, I think running a business with a spouse is, it can be challenging. So do you guys have any kind of rules? And, do you only talk business like here? Or, my husband and I are running a business together as well. And we've been trying to even schedule lunches. Like, it can't be all at home that all you're talking about is, business. So do you guys have any tricks of how you balance all that?
I think the answer to your question is no, not right now. We've met with a lot of other couple-owned businesses just to get their insight and expertise on what they do to balance the relationship, both from a personal standpoint and, and work. But as far as what we try to do, like maybe, we come home after dinner, we try to turn it off and not talk about business, but just where we're at with the business and call it a growth stage. It's exciting. So it's fun to talk about. So we enjoy it.
Yeah. I think there's a little bit of a stigma about talking to your partner about work, whether it's you're working together or not. And, your work should be something fulfilling, something that brings you joy. And so why would you not want to share that with someone? Now it's kind of funny because towards the later days of our working careers outside of Fyooz Financial Planning, Dan and I would both come home and we could understand each other's lingo and what each other was going through, being that we worked in the same industry. But it kind of turned into just us complaining, right? You come home and complain. And I think that's what people don't like, which is right. You should share other parts of your day. But the cool thing about what we're doing now is we get to share in the excitement. I get to sit here while Dan is doing these incredible things. I'm witnessing it. I'm benefiting from it. And I get to really see and share like how proud I am of him. And it's just kind of a beautiful and unique thing. So we're kind of happy to talk about it and be creative and be innovative with each other. And sometimes these creative thoughts come up while we're going on a walk or while we're coming home and I'm watching Gilmore Girls or whatever.
Yeah, I guess we do have our guilty pleasures of getting some separation. Like if I need to blow off some steam, I'll go for a run. Mm-hmm. And Natalie doesn't run, so I have that time to myself. And Natalie likes watching, as she said, Gilmore Girls, so she can have that time to just decompress.
I think the one time where we're like, okay, absolutely no business talk is when we're like on the pillow about to go to sleep and I'm like freaking out, like, oh my gosh, what about this meeting tomorrow? And Dan's like, turn it off. This is the time to turn it off. And I think my mind starts to race like right before I go to bed. And so Dan helps me in that regard. But besides that,
I'm the exact opposite. I hit the pillow and I go right to bed.
Like in the morning, you're up and at 'em, and I'm like, turn the light off. So I don't know. No really rules of thumb. Our only one rule is we always put our relationship first. So if the business is getting in the way of that, then it's an easy decision to stop what we're doing. It's kind of a fun environment to be able to start a business with your partner, but you always have to make sure like, well, what's most important at the end of the day. And so, we're really new to this. There could be people who've been with their spouse and significant other working on a business for a long time. And they're like, look at these, these two kids just trying to make it work and they're all lovey-dovey and it's not like that. But I think you have to kind of still make it cutesy. Otherwise, the romance of it will fade, and at the end of the day, that's just what's most important to us is our relationship.
I think that's a good rule of thumb. Mm-hmm. So Fyooz Financial Planning is launched. You guys are kind of in customer acquisition phase and growing. So what did that feel like to, during Entrepreneurship Week, which was carefully planned out to say we're open now? What was that feeling like for you guys?
It was super exciting. There were so many cheerleaders and champions for what we were doing and during Entrepreneurship Week, and especially making the announcement to our friends and family and coworkers or previous coworkers and previous mentors, and that was really exciting. I think what's been surprising is you think that you're going to have that team and that squad every week, every day saying, you're doing it. Like, look at you taking a risk and putting yourself out there. And the truth of the matter is people just go on with their everyday lives as they should, right? Everyone's busy. And I think it was a kind of a shock to me that I wasn't getting these texts or phone calls from my closest people saying, hey, keep going. This is the right thing. And it was almost maybe selfish of me to think that that's what it would take. But the best thing is that, I have Dan, and Dan and I, a part of our team meeting is to share our successes in the week, and we go through that. And so we we at the very least have each other to lean on for that excitement and that parade around whatever that is. But, since then it's, you really have to be maybe inward and just believe in what you're doing and know that the momentum will only continue if you allow it to. But if you let those little things like, how many Instagram likes you get or something like that kind of bring you down, then you're going to go down real fast. And so I think that's kind of the realization we've been hitting recently.
Yeah, it takes time, and just having patience with the business and then one another has been key for us.
Yeah. So that was a look back at some of your favorite podcasts of 2020, some of our most downloaded and most listened to podcasts from the last year. We'll have a brand new podcast episode ready for you next week. We've really been taking some time during the holidays to sit down with some people and have some wonderful conversations. So I'm really looking forward to starting 2021 off with some great content for you. So stay tuned next week for that conversation. And again, it was so hard to narrow the discussions I had with these entrepreneurs down to these, 10 minutes or so out of the 30, 40, 50 minutes of conversation that we had. So check back in with these episodes from 2020. When I was listening back and I heard these 4, 5, 6 times while I was editing them, I didn't remember a lot of what we talked about, and it was very impactful, and I felt that I needed to hear a lot of these messages again today. And I hope that some of what you heard today resonates with you as well and is something that you needed to hear today. So that is it for our first podcast episode of 2021. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in today. I encourage you all to subscribe wherever you listen into podcast content so that you never miss a story of entrepreneurship and innovation coming out of Rochester, Minnesota. We'll see you here next Wednesday with a brand new show.